Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for joining us again for another awesome CSA Revolution Season 3 webinar. Am I hearing myself echo here, Bhavna? Maybe somebody should go on mute, or you should go on mute. Okay, now it sounds better. Great. I think we're just waiting for some more folks to join us. In the meantime, I just wanted to share what we will be talking about today. So for those of you who have joined us in previous webinar or in this series, the idea is to really talk about the guidance, the various sections of the guidance, clarifying it from a fixed team perspective. The main objective as we walk through it with my colleagues here, I'll introduce my colleagues here from FIXA and from previous life, is to work together on the public comments, where we're actually meeting as a FIXA team October 21st in DC to really consolidate our comments so we can submit them. And I'm sure many organizations are doing the same thing. I know Tina, you guys are doing this at Baxter and Nick. So I think it's important. The main purpose of really these webinars is to get the public comments submitted as soon as possible. Now, is it because the guidance is not great? No. Every guidance has pros and cons. Personally, I like the guidance. I think it's delivering the message. Industry manufacturers are realizing the value, but then again, I think it's important that the general public really provide their comments. It is so important to provide your comments and add what you need, but be very specific. Alrighty, I think I'm gonna just roll a little bit here. So we talked a little bit about what this webinar, this is going to be on identifying the intended use, what software really you need to validate. We'll go through that. I just want to introduce my guest today, Tina Kepke, Manager of Global IT and Compliance at Baxter Healthcare, and a colleague of mine and a neighbor of mine. Well, used to be. Anik is a Senior Principal Quality System Specialist with Medtronic Global IT Quality and Compliance Management. Anik has great experience, and he's been very instrumental in the myth and facts that you've all seen us posting on the FIXA site. All right, just a few items, housekeeping items, so Bhavna doesn't yell at me. We're recording this webinar, and we'll share the recording with you in the next 48 hours with the presentation. Please send your questions on today's webinar in the chat box, and we will take your questions toward the end of the webinar. We also have a quick survey toward the end of the webinar. Survey usually really help us get you the right information that you need for the following webinars that we will have. And then please visit the handout section. There is the guidance and the letter from the FDA, if you haven't already pulled that off the FDA website. And then finally, if I scroll down a little bit here, for all the previous webinars that we have, and I'm gonna walk through it here, all the recorded one, you can visit our website, www.complianceg.com. Couple of things I want to talk about is the next episode, episode 5. We're actually combining two topics into it, two sections from the guidance, which is the risk-based approach and the appropriate assurance activity. And you're going to see how the setup today is going to go through as Anik and Tina will go through. So it's really important to plan on attending that. This is kind of the meat of the guidance. And then a very important message, the FIXA team town hall meeting. The entire FIXA team, finally, after 3 years of hibernation, we're actually meeting face-to-face at the MDIC office in Arlington, and we'll be broadcasting live from there virtually. The objective for our trip there, actually for 3 days, is to work on the public comment for the guidance. And again, please continue following us to look at the case studies that we'll be presenting over the next 3 to 4 episodes. All right, let's get to today's panel. Today's panel, really the focus on it is going to be on software used as a part of the production of the quality system, right? Most of you who have really reviewed the guidance, you've seen that. So what is it, right? You've heard us talking before about direct, systems that has direct impact to patient safety, product quality, data integrity. Is this the same or different? Well, this is what Anik and Tina are going through. And then really the Fix-It team is going to go through the directly software that is used directly as a part of the production or the quality system or support. So again, remember we used to hear direct, indirect, now we're hearing directly and support. What is the difference? Do we validate everything? Do we not validate? Do we do nothing? So those are the important things that you need to understand way in the beginning when you're really prepping for a GXP system and looking at the intended use. And then we'll talk about, why intended use, expectation, case studies. And then finally, really the next step is, again, before the ISB camp, to me, it's the important part, public comments. Read it, understand it, digest it, and then go on the FDA website and please make your comment. Alrighty, as always, big thanks to this team that worked really hard with the entire industry. I mean, this is just 2 handfuls of individuals that really worked hard on coming up with the recommendation and continue, by the way, to work on various things, but it's all in the pipeline and you will see it in the near future. But again, big thanks to the Fix-It team, and don't forget to join our Fix-It LinkedIn group where we all will share certain information. Alrighty, the draft guidance. I just want to focus on the scope, right? Many questions have surfaced about what the scope, what's not in scope. Well, what's in scope? Software, right? Non-product software, enterprise systems, personally, go for lab equipment, anything that has low impact, right? Or indirect impact to patient safety, product quality, data integrity. Think patient first, right? The guidance is not intended to provide a complete description of all software validation. We have the GPSV for that, right? It was issued back in 2002, or actually revised back in 2002. What is not in scope, and it's very important, the guidance does not provide recommendation for the design, verification, or validation requirements specified in 21 CFR 820 when applied to software for software in a medical device or software as a medical device. Okay, the risk there is a little different. And finally, when final, this guidance, it will supplement a specific section in the GPSV. But I'll leave that to you. You guys can read that. But I just wanted to highlight those few items. And then we're going to get into what software must be validated. And I'd like Tina to actually speak to that and kick it off. There's a couple of slides that we're going to talk to, and also what the Fix-It perspective on what software must be validated and how much you're going to validate. So Tina, please just walk us through.
Okay, so I would say the first step in really understanding what software needs to be validated is to understand the intended use. So that's the foundation for which all software validation, or which I would call CSA, is built upon. Understanding the intended use. And if you look at the guidance document, this is the first section. So it's the foundation for CSA. So we're all incumbent to really understand the intended use of the software. So in general, it breaks up software into 2 different types of categories. Directly, which is used as part of the quality system, or software within used for production, and software that supports production and quality system. So there's two different types, and it's really incumbent upon us to understand, based on a specific software, is it used directly or is it used in a supporting manner? So Kelly, you want to go to the next slide?
So Tina,
Yeah.
what you're trying to say, it's upon us. So are you trying to tell us we have to critically think and not just read and apply? Oh, okay, got it.
Correct. You must critically think. And one of the things that we found within the FIXA team, we would bring out an example of a software, and there would be 5 of us or 10 of us around the table, 10 of us around the table. There'd always be 1 or 2 that would say, oh no, we use it slightly different. That's why it's really upon the manufacturer to understand the intended use of the software, and that by which drives the risk. Because we can both use the same software, and one of us may use it directly, and another manufacturer may use it indirectly.
Thank you.
Or it is a support system.
Absolutely. So here really, Tina, what I would like us to discuss, and I think this should be really more of a discussion piece. We're not going to just go through this slide and all these colorful stuff. Again, thank you to Anik for his ideas. And again, this is really coming from a collective team effort to bring in, what it is, what it means to us, right? And also some examples of certain systems. But please do not take this any little, right? What is really important is based on your culture in your organization, on the appetite to risk in your organization, this could change totally, right? So it's very important to listen to your quality organization, okay? All right, Tina, just walk us through it, and please, Anik, feel free to just join Tina in that discussion, just like what we have our normal discussion, because I think it's important.
All right, so here within the guidance, you actually see 3 different classifications. We already talked about that direct. So what does it mean to be direct? Something that's controlling manufacturing, something that's in the lab, that would be more direct manufacturing. And then what about a direct quality management system? Well, what about our complaint management systems or CAPA? That's more direct. But then there's a lot of supporting software that's around it, like our, something that might be used to test our software. That's more of a support because it's not direct to the patient. So when I use it as a star, it's like, as Khaled said, what is at risk to patient? That's our North Star. That's our guiding star when it comes to risk. And then there's also a final categorization of software, which it's not direct, it's not indirect. It really has nothing to do with the quality system. Like email and telephone systems, those sort of things are just business accounting systems. So those are clearly not. So the direct and the supporting are subject to validation. However, the risk even within that software can vary. It varies based on the appetite your organization has for risk. It varies based on even what we're manufacturing. It can vary as to how we're using that software. We've had lots of discussions to say, hey, where would we put this as a risk? And it does vary according to the organization. But I would say focus first on the software that's used directly, because that gives you your first clue that this is something that would have the potential to be more high risk. But that doesn't mean that everything used directly is high risk. You can have lower risk software, you can have medium risk software, even that is something that is used directly. And it's upon us to identify that risk and scale that risk accordingly to our risk category within our own organizations.
Anik, would love to hear your perspective too.
So one of the things that we choose, the reason we choose to focus this content, because we want to highlight that this is a main difference from the previous GPSV guidance. In the previous GPSV guidance, FDA only said the type of software that need to be in scope, right? But didn't really go into the details of, it did say, you should evaluate the risk, but it didn't give any details on, what type of software FDA thinks should be high risk, what type of software should be low or medium risk. But this is the new guidance provides, a little bit more details talking about the direct, the support, and the software that's not gonna be in scope. To give a little bit more example, so that's part of the key takeaway. There should be an analysis on the intended use that can be used to lead to a risk analysis down the road.
Thank you, Anik. Now, for the software, with the following intended use is generally not considered to be used as a part of the production of the quality system, right? Now here we say not, right? Now, do you really do nothing at all? Well, what's your, because this is going to vary between, certain organizations, right?
Right. And the way I look at this, we don't do nothing. I mean, it's still our business software. So, the prime example that I always discuss is, what about our payroll system? That includes my social security number. Security, I'm concerned about that. So we're not doing nothing. It's a matter of where we're going to focus our, the CSV effort or the CSA effort. So, let the SMEs do their job for those types of software. And we're not saying you do nothing on those.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really important, specifically when we talk about software that support the production system. Let's take, for example, Jira. I'm sure every IT person now saying, "Oh my God, do I have to validate Jira?" Right? And, I'm trying to support my system, trying to innovate. Well, remember, the main objective of the CSA guidance in my GAM 5 second edition has been talking about is how to enable innovation, right? How are you going to enable innovation if you're going to have all these red tapes around the validation? You got to validate fully everything, right? Paperless validation, for example. Here we're given an example of Valerian tools. Do I really have to validate this? Do I leverage supplier or vendor documentation? And we'll be talking in the next webinar specifically about those topics. How much do you really leverage, and how much do you really do for a system that is supporting your production? What are the risks, right? It always falls onto the risk. So I think it's really important to highlight here, what is really the risk, right? And again, we go back to patient safety, product quality, and data integrity. All right.
Yeah. Right, and the key takeaway is when you understand your intended use, then you can understand your risk, and then based on that risk, we'll be treating or validating supporting software maybe in a different manner, because we don't want to do everything always the same way. We've seen a lot of things coming out from FDA and other regulators around the world, and they keep saying risk, risk, risk. So we all talk the talk, now we need to walk the walk. So let's really embrace risk and really walk the walk with risk. Don't say, oh, we're going to do all this risk evaluation and then treat everything the same way.
Exactly.
Thank you, Tina. Anik.
So, what another point that's different from the previous guidance in this guidance is that as you see on the screen, FDA recommend that the manufacturer, the company, do our analysis, use our critical thinking on an individual function, feature, and level, because as you can see in the previous slide, if you think that hey, the software that support the software that directly used as part of the quality system or in the production is the high risk, and if you stop at that, then you're gonna be validate the entire system as a high risk system. But if you do your homework, use critical thinking, break it down into feature and function, as you see in that color, right? Within the direct type of software, there's still low risk. And by doing the risk determination on the requirement or on the feature function level, there's gonna be some part that you can use a determined risk-based assurance activity that be less intensive, less documentation than the high risk one.
What I would like to do here, go ahead.
Yeah,
Tina.
and I just have another comment, which is an analogy. So, let's just take a high risk for an example. And this is really to try to evaluate, to find where that risk is, where that pointy end of the stick is. And that's where we need to focus our efforts within CSA. And my analogy, I guess it's fall here where I live, and the trees are in full bloom, and they're beautiful colors. So if you're walking in the woods, and if you're treating and looking at every leaf on every tree, treating it the same, you're going to lose your way in the woods. So let's look at, do the analysis and find where that risk is, and that's where we focus our effort. So even though if you have a high risk system, sometimes we're so busy looking at all the leaves that we really don't have, then we're just like exhausted, and then we're not really focusing on that high risk function.
So again, no matter how many guidances are going to be released, right? If we're not really using critical thinking and going through the system and understanding it and understanding the risk of it, I think we're going to go back to square one. So it's really important. And really, I mean, when I read the takeaway from here, Anik, and thank you for explaining it, intended use category can be applied at individual function and feature level to allow for risk-based assurance activities, right? I really think it's really important to take this to heart. Great.
Yes, and I think so, like in the system that directly used in production, there might be a feature or function that actually support, right? Or feature function that's actually not in scope at all. So, the guidance is saying you can use that intended use category, determine it at the lower level.
So we're saying that really the regulators are much easier on themselves and on us than we are on us, right? And I know, like Ken Shitamoto, we always says it, that, you know what, we did this to ourselves, right? So I think this is our opportunity to get out of the weeds, right? And really focus on the, I mean, we need to focus literally on everything, but at the same time, try to do the right thing for every system. Not every system has exactly the same thing. Not every Cat 3, Cat 4, Cat 5, right? So, and I think we'll get into more discussions into that as well. Awesome. I think the expectation here, Anik, if you want to take this, please.
So at the very end of this section, basically, and as Khaled talked about earlier, each manufacturing company is different, right? We see each of us see risk of a system differently, and there's a lot of factors that go into it, like the size of your company or the type of product that your company produce, right? And so it's okay to be different. The main point that's important for FDA to inspect, to assure their duty to the public, right? That is that they want to see us follow our process, have a process in place, a logical process in place. So it's our duty as a company to make sure, we document our procedure in a standard operating procedure, and make sure you do it, in a logical way. There's a good approach into determining what's a high risk and what a low risk type of feature or functions.
Tina, any comments on this?
Yeah, it's clear in this guidance document where it has the expectation for a procedure. So, it's very clear that, there is going to be differences from one organization to another. Some of us might have high, medium, low. Some of us might have high and low. Some of us might have a 5-tier. And then also our risk tolerance is going to be different. So having that procedure to apply it, and you can, and that would be the basis for CSA going forward.
So I have a question, actually. I know we're getting few questions from the attendees, but I'm going to ask this question to you both, and I want to see what each company is doing or what you would do in this situation. So guess what? I have a CSV classic, 25 years old CSV procedure. And guess what? quality is not agreeing. I don't want to change it. We're doing well with it. We've passed a lot of inspections. I don't think CSA for us. Can I recommend, hey, let's do a pilot. Let's do something under a protocol and test out a specific system, right? Would that be acceptable in your organization? Anik?
Yes. So for Medtronic, we would, if it's a pilot and we want to deviate from the current process, we have a deviation process in place. So we would document deviation upfront that, hey, we're gonna allow this deviation for the pilot initiative. We put that in place and we can do that.
Awesome. Tina?
Yeah, and the same thing, we did deviate from ours, and it was a pilot, so it was a study on that new process along with some measurement. So yeah, it is. And actually, when you look at CSA, and I know you'll see it in more webinars, it really is us. CSA allows us to focus on patient risk. That's our guiding star, not necessarily on the documentation, so that we can adapt and use the technology faster. I look at it as, especially when you get into the testing, and I know that'll be a later thing. To me, a good test case is a high probability of finding an issue, not just to capture and document. So what we found is that we actually found more meaningful issues with CSA. And I think that's been kind of something similar that we've been getting back from some of the teams that have piloted this.
That's exactly what we, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Anik.
As Ken mentioned 2 weeks ago, right, that the regulation actually doesn't go into details of how we validate the system. So the team that try to convince, if you're trying to convince your quality team, right, that's a main reason, the regulation doesn't go into details. It's our procedure, our internal procedure that usually asks us to do a lot more than we need to do, right? So in terms of creating a deviation, is it good to approve, to allow for that deviation from the regulation perspective? Definitely yes. And also, like Tina just said, CSA, the risk-based testing approach is more about reducing documentation so that we have more time to spend more on testing. So usually, when I explain this to our quality team, then they see the light and they would usually agree with the approach.
That's definitely a very good point, Anik, because really, again, the rumors around CSA, oh, we don't do documentation anymore. Oh, we stopped doing documentation. We just test a little bit, then we do low, medium, and we're done. No, that's not true. Deliverables are still there, right? There's high risk functionality that, yes, you need to script testing. However, all those low and medium hanging fruits, you know what? Now it is official that you can do unscripted testing and exploratory testing, right? So I think it's really important to acknowledge that. I had another thought, but I lost it, but it's okay. I'm going to move forward now. The SOPs, right? We always say, oh, we're going to write an SOP for this, SOP for that. I'm the kind of guy who's really been kind of hurt over the years with SOPs. We write detailed SOPs so much that it really shoots ourselves in the foot. Any recommendation from what you've seen in your 30 plus years, Tina or Anik, just any recommendation on writing an SOP that when you're actually discussing CSA, how detailed, I think any feedback would really help the industry here.
Here it's more about the detail on intended use. So, I think that's where, I would focus on the intended use in coming up with that risk analysis. And, and we've seen that even within our industry, to do some analysis to say, what do we need to validate? What do we not need to validate? Now we have that other little layer of what is direct, what is indirect. And however that methodology is, It's almost like coming up with the guardrails, because we have to allow critical thinking to allow it. And like Khaled said, sometimes we get so detailed in it, but it's to come up with that framework and that critical thinking to allow that to happen.
Thank you, Tina. Anne?
So I own about 20 procedures with
Oh my.
with Medtronic. So I deal with that every day. The way I think is that, first of all, most importantly, be clear on what's required, and start with the end in mind when you write a procedure. Once you know what's required, right? Think about what's the minimum details that you can provide, but keeping the guardrail so that people can still understand what they need to create at the very end. The details, you could move that part into a work instruction or create a guidance, so that because many times you're gonna want to have flexibility, scalability, right? The more details you put into a procedure, it's gonna be hard to scale. Sometimes you're gonna be dealing with a very small application that only need to do very small thing, and if you put too many details in there, it's a lot of burden to them, right? So we tend to keep the how out into a more flexible document that people don't really have to do everything within that.
Right, and also another technique that I've used a lot is templates. Coming up with a template. So it's a starting point. So it gives some guidance, but again, it could be modified. So it's not, to put all those requirements, so strict requirements into a procedure sometimes locks you in. And we've all, I've written procedures, I've been around for a while, and I know Khaled had to follow some of those procedures, and you didn't think about, oh, wait a minute, I didn't think about this one scenario. So really, like Anik said, keep it where these are the requirements, and then maybe have some additional guidance or templates that will aid within that process going forward.
Thank you. Anik, let's do 2 minutes on this case study, and then we'll jump into some questions. How about that?
Yep, sounds good. So this is showing example, of the analysis that we talked about earlier, when FDA recommend that we do risk analysis on the function and features. This is gonna kind of give an example of why, right? So let's talk about an example of a product lifecycle management tool that's used to capture medical device data, such as the approved supplier list, the devices certified, the DMR. Sorry, I forgot the the acronym, but or chemist document. So if we look at the intended use at the high level, this is high risk. Has a lot of device information, device specification, or manufacturing information in the system. And so in terms of category for the software, definitely a direct use as part of the quality record under the quality system regulations. But if we break it down, if we do an analysis on a feature and functions, as you can see, number 1 and number 2, maintain device production specification has the ability to build and maintain the product hierarchy or a BOM. That's a high risk, definitely, right? But when you look at number 3, ability to generate approved supplier list, and this is where, as we said before, each company may have different risks, right? For some company that may have small list of supplier, this might be a low risk. But for a company that has thousands of suppliers, this could be a high risk. And the way how you use that ASL is also different from each company. So it's important to have a procedure in place to determine how you determine the risk. And also when you do a risk analysis, do it as a team, and make sure you debate it out and have the input from multiple departments, so that you arrive at a logical way to determine risk. Number 4, number 5, and number 6. 4 is about audit trails. 5 and 6 is more of a usability, or something that help people do their work easier. this can be low risk. It can be determined as low risk, and this is where you have the opportunity to do less documentation, and you still trying to assure the quality of the system for all the user. You can still try to a lot of time we talk about not wanting to document the user experience requirement into our validation, because as soon as we add that, we have trouble satisfying or test the user experience requirements. But using CSA, you can do that. You have a way to not having that being a burden to your validation.
Awesome. And now it's kind of official, right? There used to be the questions, well, the guidance is not out, right? Well, guess what? Now the draft guidance is out. Now there's another question, says, well, this is just a draft guidance. Do I need to wait to implement until the final guidance? What would be your answer to that? I have an answer, but I want to hear your answer, and I'll say my answer right after you.
Right. I would say no. The regulation says to validate. It doesn't say how to validate.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're the ones that say how to validate. And also, clearly, everything that we're hearing is saying focus on risk, focus on quality, focus on patient. So this is just a methodology to embrace that risk within our own processes.
Thank you. Anik? I
not really have anything to add, but I think look at the FDA and the industry, including ISP. We have everyone's intention is clear that we want to focus on quality and not documentation, right? We should step out from the conservative thinking and embrace this change.
Thank you. So here is my answer. So we've been working on this for a very long time. Since 2017, as far as I know, some statistics, right? We've helped many clients. I know we have over 40 plus clients that we supported with CSA. Over 100 plus, they did it actually on their own, just from attending webinars and education sessions, etc. So CSA is, to be honest with you, is old news, right? GAMP 5, ISP GAMP issued multiple guidances about it, right? GAMP 5 second edition stated exactly what CSA is, and we're focusing on critical thinking, right? So that's really what CSA, and I always say CSA is the sexy label for GAMP 5. Yes, it is. CSA is driving this innovative approach, right? So I know this was one of the questions, so thank you. So obviously we have transitioned into question, guys, because I just want to respect time. We still have 5 minutes. By the way, this session is till 9:45 Eastern, and it's not 9:30, so hopefully you're sticking around with us. Let me go to another section here. Another question. You may leverage, but the configuration is based on your process. The validation is, does the system meet your intended? I don't know if this is a clear question to me, but if you guys can see it. You may leverage, maybe they're talking about the supplier or the vendor documentation, but the configuration is based on your process. The validation for the system, does the system meet your intended use? And that's, I think, well, you're nodding your head, Tina, if you have an answer for that.
Right. I mean, and that's why if you look at the guidance, the first step is to establish that intended use, and then to look at that risk analysis. And I know that there's, later in the guidance, it talks about different testing techniques. One of the ones that I really like is, I call it, a day in a life of testing, which is unscripted testing. Because our processes are going to have the procedures, and you give it to the users and train them and let them use it. That's valuable information, because they might discover an issue that the developers didn't even think about it, because they might click on something weird, and then you're going to find that issue ahead of time before release. And it not only verifies your the intended use, but it also gives you feedback on the procedure or even the training that you provided on that procedure.
Thank you. All right, another question here. CSA and traditional CSV does not consider other type of regulations and or acts like HIPAA, PHI, I'm going to add cybersecurity, in which the system require a level of validation. What are your thoughts? Should that follow a different validation approach?
My thoughts is that's supporting. Because, you know, do those regulations require that scripted test case? So we say CSA doesn't say don't do anything. You still, as a company, do ensure that you're meeting HIPAA and you're doing the right things. But let's not have those scripted test case and that classical validation for it. Whatever your SDLC process is, you follow it. If it's a software within the quality system or a software within just for IT, you still follow your SDLC process and you're still verifying that the software is meeting its use.
Absolutely. Anik, any comments on that?
I agree with supporting the CSA. The CSA can be used to support those regulations as well. So, you know, think about, you know, many of these regulations has some overlap, right? The need to protect the data privacy and the need to protect security access. And the part 11, they are all overlap, right? And if we already built activity in place, the security team might have something like a supplier evaluation in place that they evaluate the supplier based on many factors. Those evidence, those activities that are done for, you know, the other regulations based on CSA, you can explain, you can use that as evidence to support your validation, and that could allow you to do less documentation on the duplicate part.
Thank you. Yeah, and to your point about the overlap, I think there has been a study showing how integrated compliance in general, there is a 65% overlap between GXP and SOX, for example, right? It already talks about the same, it's really technically the same, I don't want to say the same regulation, but the same aspects of it that you need to meet those certain regulations. Sounds great. We don't have any more questions. Any last word that you like to keep to leave with our audience here, Tina?
I guess, embrace CSA and also look at the guidance and provide any feedback and comment to the docket. I know it'll be just greatly appreciated. It'll just make the final document, final guidance that much better.
Thank you, Tina. Anik?
So I think I found this webinar series to be very useful. I've been looking at every one of them, so I encourage. So even myself with experience with the Fixa team and with in this area for about 15 years now, I still learn a lot with this webinar. So I encourage everyone, the remaining for 5 weeks, I think you should attend. It's very good. Thank you, Khaled.
Thank you, Anik. Thank you. I appreciate you both. I know you're always busy, and I appreciate your time to join me on here. And thanks to our attendees. Please look, on our, when we share with you, I'd like to look at the schedule here, and please plan on attending episode 5. I think it's going to be another exciting one. And do not forget the Fixa Town Hall live from MDIC office. Anik, we need to see you there. I know you're still undecided, so hopefully you'll get to be there in person. I know Tina and I will be there. So looking forward to see you guys. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hey.